Well, welcome to the Workflow Solutions webinar on using Zoom and doing podcasting. We're going to talk about some solutions for doing this very well in a professional way. While Zoom is the main focus on the conferencing side, that doesn't mean you can't use other platforms, but this is the one we get the most questions about, so that's what we're going to use as our example. Now, when we talk about this, we want to really look at what are the factors that affect streaming and podcasting. Well, number one in paramount is sound quality. You got to start with an amazing sound signal to begin with because it's only going to get worse as it goes down the line. Number two, understanding the conference audio settings in our platform like Zoom, GoToMeeting, Join.me, Microsoft Teams is very important. Also, it's good to consider whether we want to do mono or stereo. Now, the human hearing is really designed to hear timing differences between the left and right ear. And doing things in mono, we do get fatigued much faster. So if you want your audience to have a positive experience, I recommend doing stereo, especially if there's audio content, music, anything that isn't just spoken word. Then it's always a good idea to try to do your podcasts and your streaming in stereo for that reason. We're also going to identify managing desktop audio. We're going to get into greater detail on what that is and why it's important. And last but not least, performing quality interviews remotely, using the internet to make a connection with somebody remotely for our podcast and getting very good quality audio. So those are the factors that we really want to focus on in this webinar. So in order to get started, do I need a high-end, expensive, state-of-the-art recording studio? The answer is no, I don't. Some of the components that we suggest is a good microphone, a great mic preamp, because that's going to make even a bad or mediocre microphone a lot better sounding. Headphones. Also, do I use an audio interface or do I go with like a USB mic or headset? I'm going to recommend an audio interface, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. Also, remote recording solution. I need a good remote recording solution. Show me a way to record somebody remotely and get good quality audio and have the ability to separate that audio from my audio if I'm the host, so I can do post-production. So we're going to go into all of that, and those are good components that you want to look at in doing streaming, podcasting, and even doing meetings with Zoom the right way. So let's talk about Zoom. And again, I'm using Zoom because I get the most questions about Zoom. That's not to say that other platforms aren't good. A lot of what I share will apply to the other platforms, but there are some Zoom-specific tips and tricks that I'm going to go over. So we're going to talk about improving audio in the Zoom platform itself. I'm going to teach you about the original sound feature, audio routing, being able to select what input device I'm recording that's going into Zoom and what output device. In other words, all the people on the Zoom call, where's their audio going to go? And there's reasons you really want to separate that. And sometimes I even use two separate devices, one for my mic, something else for my listening. And also this idea of joining and leaving computer audio. There's a good time to do that, and there's other times not to do that. We're going to get into why and where that setting is. All right. Now, if you're accustomed to using platforms like Zoom and doing it in a web browser, I want you to stop. I want you to download the application and use the actual Zoom application because it gives you more flexibility. Also, when you have a Zoom account, you can go to zoom.us, log into your account, and the first thing you want to do is you want to go to In Meeting Advanced, which is in that area, and you want to allow users to select stereo audio in their client settings. We also want to allow users to select original sound in their client settings. So, what about the application settings itself? In the application, whether you're already on a Zoom meeting or even before you join, you can go to your audio settings. This is where you can select what your output device is and what your input device is, and they can be separate. And there's also an advanced feature down here on the bottom where you can select that, and that'll take you to this area. And you're going to want to engage these checkboxes. Show in-meeting option to enable original sound. And then when original sound is in fact enabled, we want to disable echo cancellation. We want to be in high fidelity music mode, and we want to use stereo audio. And these settings are all tied together with the turn on original sound button that you will now see in your Zoom window. And that can be found right up here in the top left corner. And when that says turn on original sound is not on. You need to click it. and then it'll switch to turn off original sound, and that's how you know you're in that mode. So if you're using an audio interface and headphones and a good microphone, you're playing music out of your PowerPoint presentation or whatever it is you're doing that's audio critical, you're going to want to use original sound. Turn it on. If you're just doing a Zoom kind of thing and it's just dialogue and there's no music and you want the echo cancellation on and you don't need stereo and it's just spoken word back and forth, you could probably turn it off. All right. And the last thing I want to show you in Zoom is leaving computer audio. Why would I do that? This would basically accomplish the following. I would be connected to a group of people or another individual on Zoom with camera and screen share, but audio would be handled by a telephone call because you can call into an 800 number, or, and this is where I'm going to get into using when you want to use a third-party codec. Why do you use a third-party codec? Because a third-party codec is going to give me full resolution 20 to 20K connectivity, depending on the codec I use, and I'm going to show you which one we recommend. And that would allow me to be on Zoom for video and use the audio in parallel to video, but it's different and it's better. And I mainly recommend that for remote interviews and remote recording sessions. All right, let's talk about the audio interface. How do I choose an audio interface? Now, there's a lot of considerations to this question, but I'm going to answer this question in the context of Zooming, conferencing, podcasting, streaming. These are the considerations. First and foremost, sound quality. What mic preamp, what converters does it have? Got to start with the best possible original source. Number two, I recommend something with low latency drivers for a variety of reasons, but simply stated, I don't want any delay. If I'm using the computer to process my audio in any way, I want to hear that quickly. I don't want to hear, 30 milliseconds later. Now, the third bullet is extremely important for podcasting because I need the ability to have quality monitoring and various headphone mixing options. Well, if it's just me and I'm doing something remotely with another person, I need to be able to send them a mix or a mix minus. In other words, mix minus themselves because they don't want to hear themselves coming back at them several milliseconds later. It's a slapback echo and it's very annoying. Also, if I'm doing an interview with somebody locally in the room with me and I have an audio interface with multiple headphone outs, I don't need any more equipment and I can do separate mixes for my headphones versus my monitors and stuff like that. All right, managing desktop audio. First and foremost, what is desktop audio? Desktop audio is going to be all the programs that you use that produce sound that are not flexible. What does that mean? Well, basically, iTunes, Windows Media Player, YouTube, Facebook, anything through a web browser, Zoom, Skype, GoToMeeting, Join.me, Microsoft Teams. Those are all programs that have very limited audio capability in terms of routing. So when we talk about managing desktop audio, we're talking about those audio programs where everything just sort of goes to the main out, the 1 and 2, the headphone jack on your computer. Now, there are other audio programs like tested measurement software, digital audio workstations, different composition programs. Those give you flexibility because they see your audio devices inputs and outputs and will show you all of your audio devices inputs and outputs. So there's a lot of flexibility there. But since a lot of us who are doing podcasting and Zooming and conferencing, we're using programs that are very limited in terms of their audio scope. So we need an audio interface that can properly manage desktop audio and give us flexibility to do a mix, say, in the computer virtually, and make that mix available to Zoom so everybody on the Zoom call can hear that mix. Or if I am doing a recording session with somebody remotely, I need the flexibility to manage their audio from Skype or Zoom or a third-party codec differently than my own audio. So I need some kind of audio interface with some sort of mixing console with some flexibility. And we're going to show you what that looks like. Now, I/O and expandability is another important consideration because you might expand. You might need the need for more inputs, more outputs, more microphone inputs. So you want to get an audio interface that has that capability. And the last thing that, again, in the context of podcasting and streaming and things of that nature, bus-powered and portability is nice because you might do a podcast at a trade show in a hotel room, in a lobby, at a restaurant. You don't always have an outlet nearby to connect your gear to. So having something that's bus powered, meaning that it gets its power from the USB port, is very helpful. So those are some considerations that we want to consider when it comes to an audio interface and choosing one. So what is our recommended solution? After identifying the factors and sort of giving you the suggested components and sort of giving you things to consider about an audio interface, what do we recommend? Well, we really recommend a package. One is from RME, the other is from Digigram. The RME BabyFace Pro FS is a perfect audio interface for this, and Digigram's Akoya Guest is a great solution, probably one of the best solutions for remote recording and remote connections for high-quality audio over the internet. Let's start with the audio interface. So our recommended setup looks something like this. We have a BabyFace Pro. It's connected USB to the computer. In the BabyFace, in its FPGA, field programmable chip, is the Total Mix software, which is part of the RME interface, and it's found in every RME interface, actually. And we're going to talk about Total Mix in a little bit more detail in a second. This interface is great because it's portable, it's bus powered, works with Mac and Windows and iOS. When I use it with iOS, I have to get the external power supply. Otherwise, it's bus powered for Mac and PC. It has 2 microphone inputs that are very high gain, very high quality, reference class, and I don't need a cloud lifter or any third-party equipment to bring a very expensive or certain types of microphones up to the proper level. I don't need anything. I can just connect it directly to my BabyFace. So whether I have a very inexpensive microphone or something very amazing, I don't have to worry about that. Also, the BabyFace Pro has other analog inputs on the side, which we'll get into in a minute, and it has plenty of outputs. Those outputs would be used for your studio monitors and for 2 separate headphones. So I don't need any external equipment to have me and a guest doing a podcast together in the same room. Very, very powerful, very flexible. What about the remote recording solution? What we're recommending there is Digigram's Akoya Guest, which also is Akoya Connect, is the SIP infrastructure. It comes with this software. It's a subscription, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail. So those 2 products work together to give us the ultimate podcast setup and also ultimate streaming setup. All right, why Total Mix Effects? What is so important about this virtual mixing software that's included in the BabyFace? Well, there are lots of benefits. And I could go on for 20 minutes about those benefits for studios and for live sound and all kinds of audio engineering applications. But specifically for podcasting and streaming, these are the benefits I want to point out. Total Mix is going to perform all the physical and software routings that you need. It's going to give you headphone mixing capability both locally, the headphones connected directly to it, and any remote connections that you're doing over the web. And I'm going to demonstrate that later. It has built-in EQ on every input and every output, so I can tweak my microphone, I can tweak the guest audio if I need to, so that's very useful, and I'm not doing it with any plugins. It's all built into the BabyFace. There's something called Loopback. This allows me to create a mix in this environment and send that mix to Zoom back to my guest, or send that mix to Akoya Guest, or send that mix to my headphone out and have that be different than the mix going to my studio monitors, for example. Also, Total Mix is going to replace the need for any kind of physical mixer, and it's going to keep my space clutter-free and very portable because we want to be portable. The last benefit as it relates to this context is workflow automation. There are certain things that I do when I'm recording than when I'm listening and mixing. So having that automation, being able to quickly get into a mode of I'm podcasting, I'm using Zoom for a business meeting, I'm doing recording, all of that can be saved and recalled instantly, which saves me a ton of time, and it doesn't stifle the creativity. What about the hardware? Why the BabyFace Pro? Well, it has 4 analog ins and outs. It's got XLR balanced mic ins on the back. It's got XLR balanced outputs that can go to my monitors, my studio speakers, if you don't know what a monitor is. It also has 2 instrument line inputs on the other side, so I can add analog mic pre and add more inputs that way for more mics, or it has digital I/O on this side, which is called ADAT light pipe, so I can get an Octamic XTC or an Octamic from RME or any device that has ADAT light pipe and add more I/O that way. It also has 2 headphone outs. One is a IEM out, or a little mini TRS mini plug output. The other is a phono headphone output. So I can connect 2 pairs of headphones at the same time. There's also MIDI. So if you're using MIDI for any composition or keyboard or any kind of thing like that, that's nice to have for the musicians in the audience. Also, regarding the BabyFace Pro specifically, recently in 2020, in the beginning of the year, it was completely overhauled and upgraded with a steady clock FS circuit. So the clock frequency is down in the femtosecond range. So it improved the mic pre's, the converters. RME put some of the headphone technology from the 80i2 Pro into the BabyFace. So you get an amazing piece of hardware. Also, RME partnered with the Plugin Alliance and Scuffum Amps to include other plugins that you might find useful depending on who you are and what you like to do. So there's a guitar amp simulation plugin, which is also standalone software, which is in and of itself probably $150 value. Also, Brainworks, Opto Compressor, and MasterDesk mastering tools are included. So all of this is included. So when you register your BabyFace, or if you end up getting an RME Fireface even, you'll get the download instructions via email to get these plugins at no additional charge. So what I'd like to do next is I would like to demonstrate Total Mix on the BabyFace, followed by getting around on the BabyFace unit itself, because the BabyFace Pro is not only an audio interface, but it's a standalone mixer. So you're getting 2 products for the price of 1. All right, let's show you how to get around on the Total Mix software. First thing you're going to notice is we have our hardware inputs at the top, our software playback in the middle row, and we have our hardware outputs on the bottom row. My inputs are analog 1, 2, instrument 3, instrument 4, which are the line inputs on the right, and then of course my digital inputs. And then the middle row corresponds to software playback channels, but the names of these channels are mirroring the inputs. A lot of times I like to double click and I can save a different name. So I can call it software 3 and 4, and continue if I want to. My hardware outputs are my digital IOs, my headphone, and my main out. And then I have a loopback feature on every single output. I can make any output look like a software input and then record that to a DAW. So if I wanted to record interviews, either remotely or over the internet in any different way, I can create a mix coming into any one of these outputs and use the loopback feature. And as long as I select that in my software as a source, ADAT 3 and 4, this mix is what's going to get recorded. So let's show you what creating mixes looks like, because that's the most common thing you'll do in Total Mix. Now, in order to do so, let's talk about right here this little section called the routing mode. I always recommend that people use submix mode. And if you inadvertently get out of submix mode, always check right here. Submix mode is an easy way to get around on the RME interfaces, because essentially all you do is click on an output and it highlights. And when I highlight an output, notice underneath every fader, I have the same thing showing. So this tells me that any change I make is going to output 1 and 2. This is telling me any change I make is going to the headphones output 3 and 4. So if I want to change a mix that I'm hearing in my headphones, I simply move faders. I can add EQ and add effects to anything that's going on. And now that's what I'm going to hear in the headphone out. But as soon as I click on the main out, the mix is completely different. And then I can create other mixes on the various outputs that are completely unique. So Total Mix, one of the most powerful things about it, whether you're podcasting, whether you're doing conferencing, or any application of recording of any kind, is I can create different mixes and record those mixes into software. Very, very powerful. So let's give you some of the basics, how to get around in Total Mix. Well, first thing you notice is I hit this little effects thing. So there is built-in effects. There's reverb and echo. And to put effects on my voice, I simply bring up the effects send. And now my voice, which is coming in right here on input 1, is going into the reverb. Now, if you want to hear that, I bring up my return. I also bring it up in the headphones so I can hear it in the headphones. I'll bring that down now. Now there's also delay, so I can uncheck reverb, hit echo. And now we have delay. So that's using the effects, all right? Let's talk about EQ. Every input has EQ on it. Every output has EQ. I can record the EQ to my software or just use it in monitoring. So in order to record it, you have to pull up the BabyFace Pro Fireface settings, and there's a simple checkbox that you choose EQ for record. That's all you do. I have it unchecked right now. So I can simply click the EQ button, turn it on. So there's my EQ on my voice. And then I can save different presets. So if I wanted to save this to preset number 2, and I'll just leave it alone. There it is. And I can pull up different presets. So if I wanted to do a factory, maybe make it sound like a telephone. Now my voice sounds like a telephone. And now I just went back to my other setting. I also have EQ on the output. So if I want to change the EQ to my headphones, I can do that here. So if I have certain headphones that I want to just always have a certain EQ curve, I can do that. It's a 3-band EQ that has gain, frequency select, and how much around the frequency, which is the Q. And then, of course, we have the low-cut filter. So now let's talk about snapshots and layouts. Snapshots are simply saving a mix that I have going on. So let's say I have a mix that I like, and this is how I always work, and I'm going to plug in my microphone, and I want my microphone to immediately have a certain gain setting. So maybe on this mic, I'm at 39 dB. I'm not using phantom power. I'm not using a pad. And I have that microphone feeding both the main out and feeding my headphone out. And this is kind of like my starting position that I always want. And I'm using loopback, which I'm going to explain in more detail, but I'm using loopback so the main out, which is channel 1 and 2, can be recorded. Also can be accessed in Zoom, because Zoom is going to see channel 1 and 2. So any mix that I'm feeding here is going to Zoom or Skype or any type of software that is more of a system type of software. If I'm using a digital audio workstation, I will see all of these inputs as an option. So let me just save this mix. So I hit store, and I'll just save it as BabyFace Pro Demo. So now anytime I want to get back to this mix, I just hit that button. Also can save the mix by going up to the file menu and do save snapshot. And of course I can load snapshots. Now, let's talk about layouts. Layouts is simply a workspace. What is the view that I want? Now, if I'm a podcaster, I'm not using all these IOs. So I could go into my options. I could go to channel layout. I could actually, there's my channel layout. I could actually hide channels that I'm not using. I'll leave all the software playback alone right now. In fact, I might just, while I'm here, call it software 4 and 5. Sorry, 5 and 6. Just want to show you what's possible. Software 7, 8. And maybe I don't need these others, so I'll hide those. And then the outputs, I'm only using the main out and the headphone out, and I'm not using anything else. So I can hide those. And now my interface becomes much more streamlined and much simpler. And if I want to save this as a streamlined layout, I can. And I can also go to other layouts that I've saved, but the mix settings don't change. So I can get back to different workflows for recording versus mixing, etc. So layouts are very useful. And of course, I can also save layouts here by just doing save workspace as, because that is going to give me the ability to go beyond what I have here. Now, the last little trick is hitting the W key on your keyboard, and you get a workspace. A workspace is a combination of layout and mix. So I have different workspaces that have layouts that I like that also include the mix. So let's say I go back to my streamline layout, and I have my mix that I like, and I want to save this as a workspace, as a default workspace. So I'll save this as my setup, save, and now I can get to it. And I'll go back to the basic way and maybe just change my EQ and maybe bring the level down a little bit. And I'll save this as my other workspace, my setup 2. And now I can very quickly, whenever I want to do my work, hit the W key on the keyboard and get right back to where I want to be to start recording, start podcasting. So these are some of the basic tools to get around in Total Mix. The last piece of getting around in Total Mix is using groups. You have mute groups, solo groups, and fader groups. So if I wanted to basically have a mute group, I can hit edit, choose number 1. And let's say I want to mute those groups. Now when I hit that, it mutes those groups together. And the same is for soloing and changing faders. So if I want to control a bunch of faders together, I could do the same thing. And now anytime that's selected, I just grab a fader and they all stay relative. And since channel 3 was slightly high, that's why it looks that way when I do it. And of course I can clear all those as well. So hopefully between getting around in groups, snapshots, and layouts, this has been very helpful. Showing effects, submix versus free mode. The last thing is over here. This is just showing you where the effects are, showing me where I have trims set. This shows me where I've custom named things. So remember, I custom name these channels. As soon as I hit names, it goes back to the default. And 2-row is a nice feature where if I want to take the software playback channel and pop it up on the top row and just streamline the GUI even more, it's just another option that you have. All right, so now that you've seen how to get around on the BabyFace in terms of Total Mix, now I want to show you the BabyFace in terms of its tactile buttons and the fact that you can not only use it while you're recording, because I don't always want to use a mouse to make changes. I want to be able to go to the unit and control the volume, maybe do something quickly, or ride the gain or something like that. So let me show you a little bit about getting around on the BabyFace. And remember, the BabyFace can be a standalone mixer in addition to being an audio interface. Very cool. Okay, let's just show you how to get around on the BabyFace directly. Now, this is an audio interface, but it's also a standalone mixer. As such, there are tactile buttons that allow you to get around on the unit, whether I'm using it with my computer or using it in a standalone mode. Now, we have 2 mic inputs on the back, 2 balanced outputs on the back. So there's 2 analog in, 2 analog out. There's 2 analog in on the side that can be line or instrument, and I got 2 headphone jacks. On the other side, I have digital I/O in the form of ADAT and SPDIF, and I also have my MIDI, USB, and if I want to, I can use an external power supply and use this with an iPad. So what I'm about to show you is how to get around on the unit, whether I'm using it standalone or using it with the computer. So one of the most common things you're going to do is change the output level. So if I want to toggle between channels 1 and 2, headphone, and the first 2 outputs of the digital I/O, I simply select it, and I can change the level. So commonly, you're going to adjust your headphone level. So you select headphones, and now I can change the headphone level very, very easily. If I want to change the output, which is going to you guys, I can change it here very, very easily and bring it up and bring it down. Over here on the left, I have the input section, and I can toggle between input 1 and 2, input 3 and 4, and the first 2 inputs of the digital I/O. So input 1 and 2 is my microphone inputs. So there's my microphone here. I also can go to the right channel. Now, to adjust the gain of the inputs, you simply choose which pair of inputs you want to control. So I'll go to input 3 and 4 right now, hit the select button. There's input 3, there's input 4, and then I can do them both together. So let's go to input 3, and that's changing the gain. And I can see very, very easily what's going on with the gain. If I want to go to input 4, I can change the gain again. If I want to control them together, I hit select again, and now they're both highlighted. and I can keep them relative. So for my microphone, I simply go to input 1 and 2, hit select, and now it's highlighted, and I can change the gain of my microphone, hit it again, and I can now change the gain of microphone input 2. All right. I also can turn on phantom power very easily in this section as well. What about mixing? I mentioned that this is a standalone mixer. So how would I mix the level of my microphone to my headphones? Well, I simply go to the headphone out and then hit mix. And I'm already on 3 and 4. So let me go to input 1, hit mix, hit the select button. And now I'm controlling the level of my microphone going to my headphones, my headphone out. If I hit select again, I'm now controlling microphone 2 going to my headphones. If I was using this mixer as a sort of a DJ mixer, I could go to the output and now control the level of my microphone going to the output, which is actually feeding this recording. All right, so I'm on 1 and 2. I've hit select, and now I'm changing the level of the microphone going to the output 1 and 2. So I hope this sort of explains what you can do just directly on the unit between the output section, the input section, creating a mix, turning on phantom power, creating your gain control, as well as the dim, which is how you can dim the output down to a preset amount of gain. All right. So some of the value points here with using Army interfaces is going to be sound quality, reliability, latency performance. Army has got world-class support, tech support. The interfaces themselves are expandable. Total Mix is included on everything. There's even calibration and metering software that comes with it. And of course, all the internal DSP that I went through and those third-party plugins. And I'm going to demonstrate the loopback feature again when we start doing the remote recording. So let's talk about that next. Akoya Guest. Akoya Guest is the recommended solution that we recommend for remote recording. Now, remote recording can be done with Akoya Guest by simply engaging a link that you get with your subscription, and you send that link to your customer, or to your guest rather, and the two of you make a connection. So normally Akoya Guest is used in the broadcast sector. And in the broadcast sector, it's used to interview people for a radio program, people that are stuck at home, those types of things. So it's all possible, and this is where it's normally used. So it's a very professional solution. But today, we're going to talk about using it for podcasting. Now, there are many folks professionally that use Akoya Guest for radio programs. It all can be done on a laptop and a web browser. DNR Studios is a good example out of New York, and Akoya Guest is just running from a browser. And we're going to demonstrate that for you. So the way it looks in the browser is you basically put a link in your browser, and you get a 3-channel mixer, one for the microphone or an audio interface that you're using. And then you can preload music files if you want. Don't really need that for a podcast if I'm doing a guest, but it's there. And by simply hitting the green call button, I can make that connection. So the way Akoya Guest works and what is possible is that I can do a web browser to web browser connection. So me at home and a guest somewhere else in the world. So that's strictly software. I can have hardware. I can have a Digigram hardware box in my studio and have links out there to guests, and I can do multiple guests at a time in that scenario, and I'll show a better diagram for that. And I can also use it with third-party codecs. So if I'm interfacing with radio stations and other existing professional broadcasters, chances are they have some kind of third-party codec already, and it's good to know that Akoya Guest will work with that. Now, what about remote multiple guests at once? So I have 2 links. I send a link to guest A and a link to guest B. By using a hardware codec on my end, I can have the first guest on channel 1 and the second guest on channel 2, and then I can feed audio out of my BabyFace into my Digigram box, and then that's going back to both of them so they can hear everything. And this can scale even bigger. There's even hardware called a ServeLink, and I can have 8 up to 64 guests at one time. That's doing mono, or 32 guests in stereo. with something known as a serve link. And of course, I can add more serve links for more channels. So I just want to show you all that's possible. And of course, I would have that serve link on the studio end. So let me do a couple demonstrations of, first, let me just give you the basics of Akoya Guest and just how it works and what it looks like. And then I'm going to show you how we can use Akoya Guest for podcasting. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to show you how fast and easy it is to use Akoya Guest. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our Akoya Guest link that's been provided. We will get a green call button, which means we're ready to make the call. We have a mute button, mixer, and settings. I'm going to go stereo with the best quality setting. I'm going to elect not to use any DSP. I will activate my mixer, use my audio device that's connected, load some music files. Get a good mix. We can listen to our files and we can turn broadcasts on and off. We will be broadcasting, so we'll have all those on. You can see my mic. Set a level of my music. Do the same down here. Okay, once I'm ready to go, I can cue up my music to wherever I want, make the call. We're now connected and we're broadcasting. If I want to hear my microphone in my headphones, I can simply hit the listen button, start the music, and then control the mix in real time as we broadcast. If we want to loop music, we can do that. Play our other piece. And it's that simple. Thanks for watching. All right, so now let's demonstrate. Now that you have the basics, let's demonstrate Akoya Guest using it with the BabyFace and Total Mix and using it to do a remote recording. Okay, what I'd like to do now is show you how to do a remote recording of a guest over the internet. And what we're going to illustrate is really a couple things. We're going to illustrate how powerful the BabyFace and Total Mix are for managing both your microphone and somebody else's audio remotely. How powerful Digigram's Akoya Guest is, which is what we're going to use to connect to somebody remotely, and how powerful the loopback feature is, which is available on every one of the outputs on your BabyFace Pro. So first things first, let's connect to somebody remotely using Akoya Guest. So I have connected to my colleague, and by simply connecting a link in my browser and that colleague puts a link in their browser, we call each other by hitting the green call button. It's now red, so we're connected. So Marie, why don't you say hello? All right, and let me put loop back on so you all can hear her. Go ahead and say hello again.
Hello there.
All right. So in order for you to hear her, I had to use loopback on my main out, which I've now disabled because I want to illustrate how I can control my audio and her audio separately. So as you can see, I'm on mic input 1. She was coming in on software channel 1. And I'm going to take an output that I'm not using and engage the loopback feature. And by simply bringing up the fader on that output, you won't hear, well, here, let me put loopback on. Marie, why don't you just do a test 1, 2, 3?
Check 1, 2.
All right, there she is on ADAT SPDIF 1 and 2. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck loopback on main out 1 and 2 so we don't get it twice. And by simply going to my DAW, which in this case I'm using Reaper, I will insert 2 tracks, 1 track for myself and 1 track for my remote guest. My audio is pretty simple because I'm just coming in on mic input 1. I hit that, there's my audio. Now in order to get my remote guest, I'm using the loopback feature in Total Mix. So she's going to be going out ADAT SPDIF 1 and 2. By engaging loopback, that's going to look like input ADAT 1 and 2. So in my DAW, that's the input I select. Mono, ADAT SPDIF 1, which is where she is. You guys won't hear Marie, but Marie, why don't you say something?
Hello there.
There's her
Hello.
audio. And now we could hit record. And I could say, Marie, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
And then I can talk and she can respond.
Hello, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you can see in my DAW, our audio is completely separate. And that's all accomplished by using Akoya Guest as the audio codec over the internet and using Total Mix loopback feature to do a separate mix. Thanks for watching. All right. So let's talk about applications, different setups that we can do with what I've showed you today. So again, to review, we have a BabyFace Pro with all our inputs and outputs and headphone capability and total mix, and it's all in this box. And then, of course, we can use the ADAT port and expand the number of mic inputs with, say, a RME Octamic XTC. And Total Mix will see the Octamic XTC as an extension of microphone inputs. So I could put the Octamic in another room with a bunch of microphones on a table and control those microphones in a different space using Total Mix. Very, very powerful. And of course, the Octamic even has 2 additional headphone jacks. So I could literally send a mix back through the ADAT. So I could connect the ADAT out into the ADAT in of the Octamic and send 2 different independent headphone mixes back to the Octamic. So it actually is a cue system or a headphone system as well. There's something called a BabyFace Pro. Looks like a BabyFace, but has Maddie on it. And I can connect that to, say, an RME 12 mic, which is Maddie. And now I have 12 microphone inputs and outputs. 12 microphone inputs, and I have outputs as well. And then the 2 mic inputs over here on the BabyFace for a total of 14. So these are just some different ways to expand. And of course, over here on the right, Total Mix is at the center of it all. What about doing not just the added mic inputs, but I want to have remote guests. So I can use Akoya Connect and Akoya Guest it's a very nominal monthly fee. Works a lot like Microsoft Office and Adobe applications where you pay a very small monthly fee or annual fee, and you can use the software and connect people remotely, connect them in, bring them into Total Mix, and do what you saw in the demonstration. If you want to go with even more I/O, RME makes a product line called the FireFace series. In this particular slide, we're showing the UFX Plus, which has 4 mic inputs on the front, 2 independent headphone outs on the front. So I know this picture is a little misleading. The headphones would actually connect here. Also, using Maddie with the Octamic, we can now expand up to 12 inputs that way. And of course, if we wanted to get even more expandability, I could connect Maddie to a serve link from Digigram and have multiple guests at the same time remotely. So this is, hopefully you're seeing with the RME and the Digigram technology that it can start small and grow and expand with you. And we can add inputs and all this kind of stuff that's possible. Now, what are some other benefits you should know about? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is that Total Mix is a patch bay. I mean, everything can be connected to that FireFace unit that I just showed you. All the inputs can be routed and dealt with. So you have all these inputs coming in and they can always be connected. All of the outputs could be connected all at the same time. And Total Mix will basically handle all of the unlimited routing that's possible. So you don't need a mixer, you don't need a patch bay, and you can connect everything at the same time. Also, there's something called Total Mix Remote. So I could use an iPad, download Total Mix Remote from the App Store, and with an iPad be in another room or be away from the computer to control my headphone mix. So if I'm expanding my home studio or even a production studio and I have a room where all the mics are and it's different from the control room, I have that flexibility. So Total Mix Remote makes that possible. So Total Mix Remote is a huge advantage of Total Mix, and that's available for any of the audio interfaces by RME. Also, as I illustrated in one of the demonstrations, Total Mix Effects is a latency-free DSP. So it has, depending on the unit, if it's the BabyFace, we have EQ, reverb, and delay. If it's the FireFace series, the UCX, the UFX Plus, the UFX2, the 802, they have, in addition to EQ, reverb, and delay, they have dynamics. We didn't talk much about it up to this point, but there is also something that comes at no additional charge with RME, and that's DigiCheck. Now, if you're serious about audio and serious about making professional podcasts and doing streams, it's very good. It's a very good idea to have phase correlation metering, spectral analyzer to know exactly what's going on with the frequency response. If you're getting low rumbling in your room, if you're in or out of phase, all of this is possible. You also can have very high resolution meters, so you know the difference between 0 dB and -5 might be hard to see in total mix directly because it's a smaller screen. You can expand this on a separate monitor even and see very, very clearly what your levels and resolution is. If you're doing any kind of surround mixing, there's even different surround scopes available as well. There's even bit statistics and noise calibration and other measuring tools that are there for those of you that really want to get into the weeds. But all of this comes with every RME interface. Also, the third-party plugins I talked about very briefly. There's a guitar amp simulator that comes with BabyFace and the BabyFace. There's the compression plugins. These are third-party plugins that you'll get and when you register, and they're found. Total Mix is found in all of our interfaces, but the third-party plugins are found when you get any of the BabyFaces or the BabyFaces. So the BabyFace series, which looks like this, and then, of course, the BabyFace Pro, which we just talked about. So the last thing I want to share with you before we leave today is, a lot of professionals use RME, and there's a reason they use RME, whether they're musicians or producers or production or game designers. So I want to share with you what the actual professionals in our industry say about this equipment.
Basilio, and I'm happy to be here with you guys at this incredible Syntax RME event. As some of you already know, I've been using the RME BabyFace Pro for quite some time now, and since the first time I tried it, it became my main audio interface, not only here in my home studio, but also anywhere I go and I need to record. There's so many great things to point out about the BabyFace Pro, but I absolutely love its size, weight, and of course, it allows me to record my guitar with the best sound quality I need. Because of its low latency, the BabyFace Pro is perfect for me to play and record using amp softwares and guitar plugins, and I want to show you guys what I'm using today. So lately I've been checking out the S Gear 2 from Scuffham Amps, and it's great, guys. I'm digging it very much. The tones are very defined and full of dynamics, and the software comes with some really great sounding factory presets. But I also really love to dig in deeper and tweak the buttons myself, so I've created my own presets. It's very easy to navigate through the software, it's very intuitive, and I found my sound very quickly. I usually start off trying to find the right amp for the tone and sound that I want to achieve. From there, I start tweaking the buttons and EQing the amp. After that, I play around with some microphones and cabinets, and finally I add the effects that I need. The combination of the RME BabyFace Pro and the S Gear from Scuffham Amps, it's great, and I'm impressed.
I was in the dark, but you held up a light. Became my best friend who shares my bed tonight. Handed me the map to help me find myself. Made sure that I know I don't need no one else. I was in a cycle of pain that was disguised as love. I didn't know what I could know. You made me feel enough. There ain't no title.
Number one and always most important is sound quality. When I had my first interface, I was like, it can't be that important. And then I got the RME BabyFace Pro and I plugged it in and it just sounded completely different. It made my mic sound so much more expensive, which at the time it wasn't. So the old one was incredible, and then the new one with its new analog to digital converters, it's insane. Like this, it's a whole nother step up. So sound quality, I love how small it is. It's so portable, which is really important for traveling as an artist when you're on the road, or I'm from New Zealand, so I have to go back home. So it's important to have something that I can pack in my suitcase. It's also very beautiful. Like, it's a very good looking machine. It has every input and output that you need. You have multiple microphone inputs, you have multiple instrument ins, you have a MIDI in, and it has both of the headphone outputs It has everything you need in such a small unit. So basically how portable it is, how it sounds, how it looks, and just how it has literally every input you could need.
My discovery of the RME Fireface UFX 2, which is the audio interface at the heart of this whole rig. It was a journey of discovery a little bit, figuring out what was going to be that main element that goes between the instruments and the computer and kind of translates everything and makes a beautiful, pure sound. I've been hearing about RME gear for years and years, but I finally got a chance to get into it over the last, I'd say, 2 years or so, off the recommendation of an engineer friend of mine who said that I had to check it out, and I followed that advice, and I ended up choosing the Fireface UFX2. And there were a lot of reasons behind that. One of them is just the sound of it. The sound is extremely pure, and it was very noticeable when we plugged it in and tried it the very first time. It was not a subtle thing. We noticed immediately that the sound seemed to be very immediate and just musical somehow. I know that's a terrible adjective to use for anything musical, but that was part of it. Part of it was just the sound of it. It was obviously a step up from anything that we had used before.
And then when I got the BabyFace, zero latency. I mean, it was the first time I could really record. Now, I could use other interfaces, but that latency started to build up. Even when it was good, like on a track, the more tracks you added, again, it wasn't working properly. And so, again, when I switched to the BabyFace, first of all, it's super easy to use, sounds great. And I felt like, okay, here's a piece of hardware that connects properly with other hardware.
Technical hurdles will stifle creativity and progress. So with that in mind, I have a drum set that's ready to be played. It's already mic'd up and ready to go. I have a guitar amp that's mic'd up and ready to go. I have a bass amp that's plugged in, mic'd direct, ready to go. I have microphones ready for voiceover, ready to go. I've got a mic set up for specifically for meetings online that I use. And, that requires a lot of physical inputs, of course, and a lot of clever routing. And the way that I'm able to do that, fortunately, is I use RME Fireface UFX Plus interface and a RME 12 mic unit. And both of those together give me 24 physical inputs between both of those units and ADAT input and output, AES EBU, and MADI in and out, which is great. I mean, I've hooked the 12 mic via MADI into the UFX Plus so that I can utilize those channels and free up ADAT channels for other uses, such as headphone distribution amps and things like that I want to route in that way. So Total Mix Effects has actually replaced a physical mixer for me because it shows me the inputs, the outputs, and the software playback that it's accessing. And it even has EQ dynamics and effects that I can run on those channels. So if I want to monitor myself with enhanced EQ and compression, I can do that. If I don't want to record that and have the option of putting my own EQ and compression on it in the box later, I can do that. There's a lot of great power with that, and it's really alleviated a lot of extra cable snakes running that I used to have to use in order to split off and send signals to multiple units. Now everything is really cleaned up and refined. It's actually, these 2 single space racks have replaced half of my gear.
So I know there was a lot of musicians and artists and not necessarily podcasting. And of course, that last video was streaming using a BabyFace Pro actually with Zoom. And the audio was coming from the BabyFace and everything. That was Jeff Lorber Fusion Band, amazing group. But hopefully you get the flavor that people need good quality, they need good sound, they need reliability, and that's what we provide. So I want to thank everybody for your attention today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and you can do that at derek@syntax.com.